Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to teach you how to use an add-on called Layer Painter. It's developed by Joshua Knober and it's available on Blender Market and Gumroad. We had a question in the community on how do you use this add-on, and so I wanted to cover both the install, the setup, and how to go about making your own layers and painting on them and adding in your effects, making use of filters, and bringing in your own custom assets. I'm going to show you how to do all those things, and we'll get into even more, but I just want to let you know that this is a free video. I'm just doing this to help out members of the community, and I don't really gain anything from this. But if you'd like to support the developer, he's got the add-on available, and he's going to be open sourcing the next version, and it'll be available for all the community. So it'd be nice to be able to support him because they put a lot of work into this, and it's very similar to the Substance Painter workflow, and you get it at a lot cheaper. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So first things first is you definitely need to go and download both the Layer Painter zip file and the support file that goes with it. Now currently the version that's available on Blender Market is version 1.3.2, and you have a 1.3 unzip me zip file as well. Go ahead and download both of those. And once you have those downloaded, go on and head on into Blender and head on over to your edit preferences and install that zip file. Click the checkbox to enable the add-on. Make sure you save your preferences. And then from this point, you need to add the assets file. And in order to do that, you need to unzip that support zip file. So this Layer Painter 1.3 unzip me, go ahead and unzip that. And inside of here, you'll have a Layer Painter assets.blend. And when you load this file, it's going to take this and it's going to remove it and place it into where Layer Painter has been installed. So you'll see it disappear. I'll go ahead and select it. My add-ons. And you'll notice that now it's gone. It's not there anymore. It's been loaded into Layer Painter. And this is something that's really cool. I didn't know about Layer Painter, but I own another add-on called Extreme PBR. And this is just a small plug for that add-on as well. Extreme PBR has like 1,000 materials, and it's an add-on that's sold on the Blender Market. And I bought it a while back, and I use it every now and then to help mock up some of my materials. And Layer Painter has built-in support for it, which is really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and load that library. And it recognizes that I already have the add-on installed. And so I'll just go ahead and click to add in the Extreme PBR assets. Now, if you have your own custom assets, you can click on the navigation for custom in the add-on preferences. There is a PBR import section for when you're opening up your own PBR assets. So let's say you have a model and it's already got textures that you've textured in the past. You want to add a few more layers to it. You can add identifiers so it can help figure out which image, like a normal or a diffuse or a bump or an AO. You can click this reset button and it's going to set up all the identifiers so that when you load your image, it's going to search the name and see which one it is. Now in the textures, this is where you can add your own custom texture folder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you click on this button and you have a little path. And I have found that trying to click on the folder and loading it didn't work for me. So instead I just type in the path to my folder. And so I'm just going to copy my folder path where I have my own custom textures that I want to load in and paste. And when you do that, you'll load in those custom textures and they'll be available for use when you're in Layer Painter. There's also support for adding in your own custom mask node groups, your own node groups for custom filters, and your own node groups for custom VFX, for vector VFX. And I'm not going to cover those in this video. This is still technically an introductory video. But if you want to be able to make your own mask filters and VFX, you can load them just like you can with your textures. Okay, so now we have that all set up. There is autosave delay if you want to make use of that, and you can set up the key mouse. So always active makes the Layer Painter pop-up window always active. So if I click that and then I control and right mouse click, you'll see this Layer Painter pop-up window. And I can shift and right mouse click and I can move the HDRI that's available in the background. So if I click on Eevee, it's going to set up the Eevee window, and I can shift around the world view with the mouse. I'm going to turn that always active off. It only becomes active if you activate Layer Painter. But you can set up your key maps if you'd like here. I'm just going to leave them wherever I have them. And then you have the Y key for the eraser, Control Shift and Y. So let's jump right in. So we've got a model that a member of the community graciously gave me. And then I added a couple of my own assets to it. So I've got a brick wall and a couple of doors. But he added in a roller, some hangers, and then a barrel. And I just made a small scene here. Now that we got Layer Painter installed, I'm going to go ahead and save real quick. And then you just click on any one of your objects. So let's start with the ground plane, I guess. And in the materials section, on the material properties, you have a Layer Painter section. Now I've already gone in advance and made up all my UV maps. So the UV editing, I've got my maps all laid out for all my models. And I've got some of my stuff scaled. I also have some of my materials pre-populated. So like for this section, I've got 3 different materials that are set up, and there are faces that are set for each one of them. So that one's set there, this one's set for these faces, and then this one's set for these faces. So make sure you have all your basic stuff set up first. And you don't have to build a material, but I did in this case. I just made blank materials. And in the shader editor, you can see here it's just the principled BSDF. It's nothing special. And every one of these has a very basic material assigned to it, except for my bricks. They've got their own material that's assigned to them. So let's start with the barrel. We'll do the wood first. And in Layer Painter, you'll either have the default setup, or at the right, you can click on Layer Painter. Once you have Layer Painter selected, I've got my material selected. If you don't have a material, you could come in here and select one, or you click on New. So I've got it selected, and the next thing I need to do is select a preset. We're going to cover the PBR workflow, and PBR stands for physically based rendering, so real world objects, the way we expect to see them roughly in the real world. And then NPR is more for toon style. So we won't cover that in this video, but we'll do this PBR. So now that I've made my layer, I've got a PBR workflow. I can click on this layer icon, and it's going to make my first base layer. And I'll go ahead and just call this barrel wood base. And there's nothing in this layer currently. Now there's a settings, a masks section, a filters section, and a vector FX section. And I'm going to start out in the settings. So I already have some wood that I want to load in. Now you could just start painting if you wanted. You come in here and click on the paint icon and make your own material texture and just start painting on it. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to load in some PBR materials. And this is where Layer Painter is really powerful, because I loaded in the Extreme PBR assets. I click on this assets folder, and now I've got access to the Extreme PBR library. And he's got all these icons that are already set up in his library. And if you click on the icon, you can pick between the Extreme PBR lib, or you can click in here and grab anything else that's in here. So in my case, I want to find something that's in the wood section. And inside of wood, I can load up all the wood textures. And let's go ahead and give it this 2K wood. And notice how when I do that, I select it, it already pre-selects all my images. This is really cool. This is all built into Extreme PBR, but Layer Painter is making use of it. And it's loading in all the files, and it's already figured out which ones are going to go where. So I click OK, and it's already added my displacement, my normal, my roughness, and my albedo. And that's pretty cool. Look at that. That's really nice. So now that I've got all these loaded, this is now my base layer. I've got these 1, 2, 3, 4 channels that it auto-selected and loaded. I've got a nice wood material. So I can do the same thing now, load in a material for my rims. So I've made a blank material. I'm going to click on my preset, select PBR, add in a layer, barrel metal rims. I'm going to save, and then I'm going to load in another asset. This time I'm going to pick something from the metal category. Let's just do regular metal. And let's select something like metal 16. So I loaded in the albedo, the metallic, the roughness, the normal, and the displacement. Now I can change my scene settings to have an HDRI, control and right click. I can click on Eevee or cycles. I'm just going to do Eevee so it's easier to see. You'll notice now if I hit shift and drag my right mouse button, I can inspect that material, and I can also control and right click, go into my layer painter settings here and change my HDRI to look around. This will help you figure out your scene and your lighting, how your model reacts to lighting. Okay, so let's do something a little less dark. We'll do the outside one. This one works pretty good. So I'm just going to go through and add materials real quick to each of my items here. So the ground plane. Put in some assets. Let's do something on the dirt. Actually, in this case, what we'll do, instead of loading the PBR ones, I have my own custom textures. So I can click in here, and I can click on this blank one, and it'll load in textures that I've already saved. So I can select my ground plane, and then click OK. Load in textures on this material. Give ourselves a layer. Load in my own custom assets, and we'll do the rail. Click OK. Yeah, looks good. Now I've got a load of material for each one of these material indexes. So I'm just going to copy this name to make it easy on my layer. See, I actually don't want that one. I want this one. You can swap your materials that way. It's going to orphan the others, and that's fine, because I'm going to use it on this other one. So on the rollers themselves. Copy, make myself a new layer. Set up all my base layers. I'm just going to do the hanger as well. I can link my materials to this active object with Control L and link in the materials. So I change one and it'll change them all. One left to do now is set up the materials for our sliding door. Add in a layer. And let's do something in Extreme PBR for wood again. See what the planks has. Maybe something like this. Yeah, I think that'll work out nice. I'm just going to link over that material as well. Control L, link. There we go. We got some basic material set up. Now I'm not going to spend tons of time making things look pretty. It's mainly just to get the base layers set. And then I've got my base layers. I can come in here and I can add in some damage. I can start scaling in the UVs. So save your file, and then we'll just work on the main base layer. So under layer mapping, I can set the UV map. And then I can change the scale on this map if I want. Maybe something a little bit smaller. Same thing with this, set the UV map. And I want to go smaller like that. Scaling my UVs. Something along. Let's see here. I think that probably looks okay. Something around there. Yeah, I think that looks pretty nice. Too shabby. Scale the UVs on this roller. And remember that I've got 3 different materials. Something like that. Yeah, that looks better. Scale this one as well. Let's go to the hanger. Yeah, something like that. All right. So we've got a decent setup now. Got our ground plane, our doors, our hangers, and our track, along with our barrel. So all of our layers are set up on the base layer. So now we can add in another layer. And this is the power of Layer Painter. So what we've done is a standard layer. We're going to call this one, let's add in some damage. And what this is it's created an albedo, which is just the color. We can set up the map for the UV map. And then I can change this color to whatever I want. And what I can do when I set up this color, I could go to something like this. And currently I've got my selection for my layer set to layer. But if I go to the albedo, I can actually change how I want to blend this layer with the layer below it. So I could do a multiply, or I could do an overlay. I really like the overlay. So as I change this color, it's going to affect that layer below it. Mix will just replace everything that was below it. And you can also change out how much you want to mix that in. What's nice about this is all dynamic on the fly. And this is just, it's basically a fill on everything in that layer. But what I can do from this point is I can also set up to have the roughness changed. And then I've got a selection on the roughness as well. So my roughness could be mix. Well, I could set it to be multiply instead for the roughness section. And I could set the roughness to be up to 1. Maybe I want to add in the roughness. And I can determine how much of that I want to change. I could change in some bump as well, give it some more or less bump. And you're not going to see a ton of effect, but you can also do on your bump settings. And if I want mix, I can do something like add, or in this case, subtract might be a good one. You're not going to see a ton right now because we can set up a mask. So I've got I'm going to go back to my layer setting. And once I'm in layer, I can click on this mask section and I can select a mask. And let's just do a damage mask. So these are all the masks that are built into Layer Painter. And when I select it, I mean, something's going to happen and it's going to try to compile the shaders. But there are messages here saying that we've got missing bakes. And Layer Painter needs some bakes in order to run their masking. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run over the baking section. And now's a good time if you want to set up a workspace for Layer Painter, you can do that. So in the control right click button under here, you can do an add workspace. I'm just going to show what that does. It's going to create a new workspace set up just specifically for Layer Painter. And everything on the right is already pre-set up in different sections. So I've got a base textures and baking section. I've got my layer section. I've got my materials section and my layer selections. And then you can scale these up or down, but Josh has already went to a lot of work to set that up for you. So let's go ahead and use it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my EV setting. That way I can move around my HDRI. We'll do something like that so I can see my materials. Okay, so back to the barrel, we need to do some bakes. So under the baking section, I'm just going to bring this up so I can see a little bit better, and I'll bring it back down when I'm done. So I'm going to save, because sometimes when you bake in Blender, baking can crash. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and bake our maps. And so for the masks section, we've got some maps that we want to bake. We got the pointiness, the ambient occlusion, and the bevel. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on bake. Now you can click on isolate to preview the bake. And sometimes I got this to work, and sometimes I'll get it to crash depending on which one I click on. And it might just be because of my recording is overwhelming my graphics card. Let's just go ahead and bake. So I'll bake in the pointiness. And I'll bake in the ambient occlusion, and I want only local turned off so that I can have my rims interfering with the samples. Let's bake in the ambient occlusion. And then I'll bake in the bevel as well. Now I've got all those bakes done. I'm going to drag this back down. And I've got my checkboxes for all my bakes for this item. So now I can adjust how the damage is being applied and how much damage. And notice as I bring that in, you can see that the roughness is getting changed. So I can come back over from my mask sections back into my settings. I can decide how I want that roughness to come in and how much bump I want to bring in or take out, along with the darkness of that damage. Back over the masks, and I can change my scale on my damage. Set up the contrast for the damage. How much do I want to bring in on that effect? And notice how that ambient occlusion is affecting where that damage is showing up. How much do I want to occlude? Okay, and I'm going to bring that amount back just a little bit. There we go, something like that. Just give it a little bit of damage on that layer. And now that we've got our damage layer set up, we can do another layer. And let's say I want to put some sort of logo or something on this barrel. So on this layer, I'll call this one logo. And we'll make this one an actual paint layer. So we'll just have the albedo. We can set up some bump and maybe some roughness. And under the mask section, let's bring this over to something like a black color. And I will also change my albedo here. I'm going to do overlay again. Maybe we'll make it like a burn mark into the wood. And I'm going to come back over to my mask. And on this mask, I can do a texture mask. And what's nice about a texture mask is I can go in and I can paint, and it will just cause that color to show up wherever that texture mask is getting painted. I can load one in, or I can paint my own. So I'm just going to decide to paint, and I'm going to set it to all black, so nothing's showing up until I paint the white on. And resolution's fine. Click OK. And now I'm in paint mode. Save our work real quick. So open up my end panel, and I can go into my tool options for my paint menu. And I've got a stencil that I think I want to load. Let's go to stencil. And we'll do a new, load in my stencil here. There we go. Okay, so now I've got my alpha in here, and I'm going to paint in the white. Set the strength. Yeah, the strength will be good. And from there, we can just dither that. Okay, and then I can stop painting. Now I've got that texture painted in there, and I can come back over to my settings, and I can decide how much roughness I want on that logo, how much bump I want. And then come back over to my mask, and I can add in another mask now. Maybe just a dust layer. There we go. Nice little dust layer. Our texture some. Some strength there. I don't have anything working with pointiness or cavity at this point, but we do have contrast. You can change the scale of that dirt too. Now it doesn't look exactly painted. It looks like it's worn into that wood a little bit. Yeah, it looks nice. So I can come back over to my settings, and I can actually adjust my color. Get a little bit more of a burnt look. There we go. Okay, so we can do some layers on the metal bands. So go to our layer settings, make a new layer. Do grunge. On over to our mask setting. Let's give ourselves a little bit of bump and roughness and some displacement and some ambient occlusion. And we definitely want metallic since this is metal. So the grunge may have some metallic in it. I know you probably should be 1 or 0, but I'm going to play with that. We'll give it more roughness. And we'll give it some bump and some displacement. And let's leave the ambient occlusion white for now. So we're going to head on over to our mask settings. And we'll set in some, let's see, my script doesn't seem to be working. That's okay. We'll do heavy damage might be a good one. We need to bake our maps again. So I say before I bake, bring our baking menu up and we'll bake in the pointiness first. Bake in the ambient occlusion, and I want my barrel to be affected by that. I think I'll set my distance to be half. Bake in my bevel as well. Okay, so now that I got my bakes done, go ahead and bring in our damage amount. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Set our occlusion up. The occlusion didn't get affected too much for this one because I lowered it. And let's adjust our scale. Then I can come back over to my color. Maybe do something a little bit in the darker blue range. Yeah, something like that. And we got some bump we can be adjusting. A little bit of an adjustment on the bump. Let's try the occlusion. Like the occlusion affects much on this one. Okay, so the grunge layer we'll add in. I think I'm okay with that bevel mask, just the way it is. And we'll add in, we can take a look at the preview on the mask. Just clicking on this. If I invert this, decide how much I want this to come in. Probably bake too much of a bevel on my bevel mask. That's okay though. So I can bring in another mask. Let's try cells. What does cells do? Bring our scale on our cells in. And let's take a look how that looks. Pick it up just a little bit more. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. Now let's say I want to shift all of this on the base layer. So we can do on the main barrel metal rims base, we can come over to the filters setting, and in the filters I can decide to change my brightness and contrast, or my mapping for my range or color ramp. So if I do a map range, I can decide how much of the white and black I want to bring in. You have to let the shaders compile. Bring the max down. Bring that min up. Let's set these back to 1, and I'll use this to bring in my darks. I can add in another filter on top of that. So do a RGB curves. Maybe change just the blue channel. Let's give it some more. Something like that, just a small blue tinge. And then I can go on top of this and add in a brightness and contrast. And I can shift everything down. Maybe a little bit less blue. Now I'm going to bring up that back to my regular layer settings, and then I can change my layer mapping, bring my scale up. Quite a bit more. Maybe too much. Let's bring it back down just a touch. Go to my damage layer. My damage, I can go to the scale here and bring that scale up. Okay. I can come back over to my main settings here, change that color to be darker. I can set this on my layer settings to albedo. Set this grunge to be multiply. Looks okay. We'll move on to let's go to our wood. And I want to do some painting on this wood. So I'm going to make in another layer here. Let's actually just do an effects layer first, or a filter layer. And on my filter layer, I'm going to affect the albedo. And let's keep it to just the albedo for now. And let's give it some scratches. Bake in our masks. the ambient occlusion. Let's bake in our bevel. Okay, now that our bake is done, now we got to add in our layer filter, and let's change this into RGB curves. Bring this one up over here. Yeah, that's not too bad. Bring in some roughness. Let's do some bump. Change our scale for those scratches. It's obviously way too much. Out back. Let's keep the amount up and change the contrast. The occlusion up just a little bit. Yeah, I like that. We can add in maybe we should do a paint layer for this wood. That might be cool. So bring in a paint layer, and on this paint, let's do barn red. Bright red. Bring it down just a touch. And then we can bring that filters up above it. We can mask out that paint and give the paint some damage. Now that we've got everything built in, let's do some we'll do some scratches again. Actually, you know what? We're not going to do that on this layer. Let's delete that out. We'll do scratches on our own layer. Something like that. We'll scratch away that paint with a different color. So on paint scratches, it's affecting the bump. We can decide to go back to our filter and turn off the roughness. We'll see that when we come back. Let's set this to kind of a dark gray. And then we'll set the albedo for the paint scratches. We can make that an overlay. Or maybe we'll just leave it on mix. Let's see what we do with mix. Yeah, so we can get that. Let's see. Bring in our we actually do the paint layer on the bottom. Set this up for this wood material. We can actually set this to have the scratches on its layer. Get rid of this paint scratches layer here. Click on the delete button. Yeah, there we go. So we've got painted wood with a bunch of scratches on it, so I can come back to the sliding door and adjust how much I want on these scratches. So I want a lot of scratches. Scale it up. There. Something like that. Let's bring our contrast down. Get that occlusion up. Probably going to change that color of that paint just a little bit. Something along those lines. Let's do a little more here with our layers on our main color. Let's go back over to our mask and let's add in pointiness. Looks okay. So instead of mix, we do overlay. I want mix on this one. I want my paint layer to have some bump, have some roughness. Be all the way up. Roughness to be all the way up. Then we can go to the filters. I gotta get off my albedo. There we go. So I'm on my filter now. We're going to change in the It doesn't look too bad. Okay, so that's our barn doors now. We can do some painting as well on another layer. Or we could paint in some of this mask on this layer, bring back some of that wood color. And we could do an effects on this as well, just to give ourselves a little more of an RGB curve. Maybe give it a little bit more of a wood shade. Bring out some of that wood. And then we can affect the mask. Let's actually do a hue shift as well. Just a touch. Bring that value down just a touch. I like that one. Although it is a little bit wet looking. Go back to our paint layer. Our filters layer. We could bring in a roughness layer on top of this, I think. Probably helps sell it a little bit more. On this layer is my roughness. Here we go. Back to our paint layer. Give ourselves, set ourselves to EV or cycles, and let's see what this looks like. Yeah, I think that looks okay. On the very top layer, I think I want to do some sort of paint. Or on top of this paint layer, I'll do another paint. This is just going to be for fun. Paint detail. And I'm just going to do and what we can do here for this is we can set this one for the bump. We want bump on this one. This one be set to add. This one be set to add. Okay, let's go back to our layer now. My paint detail. Come into the mask section, set ourselves up a texture mask. That mask to black. Get on my tablet now, do a little bit of painting. Let's do paint on here. Bring out our tool, see what our paintbrush is set to. Ah, I know why. Because I'm not painting a... I do have an albedo set up. Back to Eevee. Ah, I'm still set to myself on stencil. That's why. Back to paint. Let's turn off the stencil mode. There we go. Switch X to change between your paint modes. And you can paint something like let's try that. Yep, that's good. Let's change our notice how when I'm painting on there, that is below all the damage layer, which is really, really cool. Just do a little bit of painting on the side here. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. Now we can stop painting. Paint on this one. Look how that paint's all faded there. That's really cool. We could do some damage on the paint as well. So we'll stop painting and we can add in something on top of the paint. Maybe some dust. And there's that dust texture there. We can bring that scale up quite a bit. Right around something like that. Bring that amount back. Yeah, let's do full amount and bring the strength back just a touch. So it looks like it's been fading in some places. I think somebody painted it, now it's starting to come off, but then there's other stuff that's farther down in. And what's nice about this is I've got the color set to white, but I can really change that color to whatever I want. So I could come in here and make it more of a yellow, or like a light orange color. And that's the power of the layer system and Layer Painter. You get to make up your layers and you can turn them on and off. So I could turn off the filter here. I could turn off this roughness layer. Just wait for your shaders to compile. And you just keep going. So there's no need to worry about the fact that your painting is, you're gonna have to go out and erase all the time. You get to adjust how you want things to come in. We'll turn those back on now. A couple more things to teach about. So we've got a folders. We can throw all of our stuff into a folder like our paint layers. So I can make a layer folder. We can call this paints. And I can just click on the up arrow once I select my layer. And it brings it into that folder. Now I've got a nice little folder that has everything stored in it. Now, we can cover just a couple more small things, like let's say we're happy with all this and we want to bake out all these textures. What we can do is at the very bottom, we have export section, and we can export to a path. So make a new folder called exports. Set our resolution. We can add to existing if it's already there. And do the height and the normal if we want, or combine maps. So a combined map, you'd pick your red, blue, and green. So typically you set these to be non-color data channels, so like bump, roughness, and AO could all go into a combined map. And then when you export that, you're going to export one map that has all three items. I'm just going to go ahead and click on export, and I'll export everything. I don't need emission because I didn't use that, or alpha. And I've got normal set in with the wood itself. So when you're ready with all that, you can export. It's going to bake all those textures. And rather than being in the shader graph, now they'll be exported textures. Now when I'm back in here, I've got my exported textures folder. Got my nice albedo all loaded up. And you can load these in for a game asset and just go. But you can do that export with all of your textures once you're done. And that's the basic usage of Layer Painter. I hope you enjoyed this video. And maybe we'll make another one, a little more advanced usage features. But let me know what you think, and catch you on the next one.